Welcome to the last session of the day. Did everybody get all their coffee in them so we can make it through this session? There we go. So as she said, my name's Theresa Miller, and we're going to be talking a little bit about Citrix XenApp 6 and just getting back to some of those core basics that I think are sometimes easy to overlook. What I have on the agenda for today are the following areas of focus. We're going to be talking about XenApp 6 patching, native printing, environment sizing considerations, infrastructure and application server redundancy, load evaluators, and Citrix monitoring. A little bit about me, again, Theresa Miller. I've been working in IT for the last 17 years, and I've been primarily focused on IT and healthcare for the last 10. I'm currently employed at Children's Hospital of Wisconsin, therefore making me a Wisconsin native. I've been there for almost 6 years. I do have my Citrix Certified Administrator certification, my Microsoft Certified Systems Engineer certification. I have a couple Epic ECSM certifications. I am currently a student at UW-Whitewater working on my master's degree. And last but not least, I will be leading an honorary student organization this fall at UW-Whitewater called Sigma Iota Epsilon. Anybody here enjoy football? Football fans? All right, so I can't totally stay team agnostic here. But a little fun fact about me, I did last year meet our NFL MVP, Aaron Rodgers, and I did get to have my photo taken with him in a photo booth. So that was kind of fun.
I didn't know he played football.
So why are we here? Part of why I wanted to be here today, I actually, back at Children's, work with a team, there's 4 of us. And over the last 2 years, we spent quite a bit of time moving from a XenApp 4.5 environment into a XenApp 6 environment that would support an electronic health record initiative. With that, there were quite a few growing pains, and I do want to share some of those experiences with you. Just to set the stage a little bit in terms of where we started, I did mention we had XenApp 4.5. We were averaging about 200 concurrent users at any given time. We were dealing with our client was just the web client, and we had 16 servers. So that held all our infrastructure, our XML brokers, our zone data collectors, everything was running on 16 servers. So we were pretty small. Where we are today is we are running XenApp 6. We have over 2,000 concurrent users at any given time, often approaching more like 2,100. We have Citrix Receiver deployed, version 3.3. And we run, did I say over 2,000 users? I think I did. Okay. Oh, we have over 80 servers at this point. So we went from 16 all the way up to 80. So there was a lot to adjust to. Just out of curiosity, what versions of XenApp do we have in the audience? So let's just start with, does anybody not have XenApp? Okay, all right. And then anybody still using the 4.5 version? We still have it too. We actually haven't gotten rid of it. Yeah, we're trying to get rid of it. What about 5.0?
All the machines that used to be 4.5.
Okay. And then 6 or 6.5, we'll just bundle those together. All right, so we're across the board, all different areas. Excellent.
How come you've seen so much growth?
The Electronic Health Record Initiative is where the growth came from. We, before we took that on, Citrix was used as kind of a onesie, twosie application. So if we only had 1 or 2 users in that application, it probably went on Citrix instead of installing it at the desktop. And then with the electronic record, everything, it's all running through Citrix. So as I mentioned, we went through some growing pains, and sometimes those pains felt as bad as that swell going after that little sailboat. Just to give you a little bit of history on how we approached our environment upgrade, we did do a lot of testing. We bought a product that would help us simulate load on our servers so that we could get a feel for how many users we could handle per server. Sizing-wise, we were told initially we were sizing for 1,900. By the time we got to go live, they were telling us only 800. But despite all of this, our real numbers were way above what we ever could have anticipated. Our real numbers were around 2,300 to 2,500, and means we weren't sized right. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of that in the upcoming presentation here. So the first thing I want to talk about is maintenance. To me, maintenance means doing regular system reboots as well as getting your patching taken care of. And it's so easy to forget that we need to do those things. You get your system built, and you just kind of want to step away and move on to other things. But we can't forget that, because that's what keeps our users running, what keeps our system stable. And so I'm going to talk about some different ways that we can approach doing reboot policies, as well as some patches that I've seen really help our environment due to issues that we have encountered. So first of all, I'm going to talk about automated reboots. Those of you using XenApp 6 and XenApp 6.5 know that you can, out of box, schedule reboots of your servers to deal with application memory leaks, to deal with system memory fragmentation through Citrix policy and worker group. The catch to that is that your users are going to be interrupted when that occurs. You can send them a notification warning that they need to sign out and sign back in, but once they hit the point that the server is going to reboot, which I think the longest period of time you can do is an hour, they will be taken down. So it's important to understand that there are other ways to deal with reboots. For example, I work in a 24/7 environment in healthcare. We can't have users getting pop-up windows saying, you're going to be kicked out of the system in an hour, when you've got patients that need you paying attention to them. So for us, we actually have custom rolling reboot scripts, and they will completely drain the users from the system before they reboot. Now, our non-critical applications, we do use the Citrix policies. And then our critical one, we use the custom rolling reboots. Now, if you look online, if that's something of interest to you, there are people who have spent time pulling these together. Otherwise, you can write your own via PowerShell to accomplish the same thing. Also, if anybody's interested, if this is something you would need, we do have a script that I'd be willing to share. If you just stop by afterwards, give me your card. I can share that with you when I get back to the office. So just take a second to look at this. I think this simulates how we feel about updates. So on the Citrix side, I think Windows updates are the ones that affect us the most. And as we are all familiar, every second Tuesday of every month, they pile more on us. So that in itself is a task to consider. Citrix has also put together a really great article that helps you keep track of updates that benefit Citrix. This document is focused on XenApp 6.0 and XenApp 6.5. And it also covers out-of-band Windows updates. So if all you're doing on your Citrix servers are Windows updates and then maybe occasionally doing a Citrix patch, you might be missing some of the key patches that would affect your system. So make sure you get used to using this article if you're not already. One of the updates that I want to call out is actually on this list is XenApp 6 Rollup 2. I highlight a couple of the key issues that are fixed with this, and actually stepping back, the two issues noted up there were fixed with patches that came up with Rollup or came out with Rollup 1, but they were separate from Rollup 1. So you probably, if you don't do routine Citrix updates, you may not be protected from these issues. Rollup 2 bundles everything, so it does cover them. We've experienced both of these. The Citrix print spooler crashes, not related to any drivers that might be on the server. It was a Citrix issue that was resolved here. This other one, this WinLogon, uses high CPU. We were the second customer to use this patch before it was even released to the public. This was actually one of our go-live issues we actually had some downtime with our electronic health record go-live, and this was one of the primary reasons. Users can't log in if the CPU is consumed. So Citrix gave us a DLL file to put on our servers, and they did include it in this roll-up. So if you plan on placing any kind of load on your Citrix servers, I do recommend moving forward with Rollup 2. We've been running it since like April or May. This other update, this came about recently. It came to our attention recently because of other issues that we have seen when they started at Go Live again. It's like we had all these issues pop up on us, even though we did all kinds of load testing. What we were experiencing and have randomly experienced since November is we'll have a Citrix server that all of a sudden, out of the blue, loses all of its connections. Every user that was on that server moves to a disconnected state, and they're stuck until you reboot that server. So I've done countless calls with Microsoft and Citrix, sending them memory dumps to get to the bottom of this. And out of one of my most recent calls, this roll-up came about. We have been rolling this in since June, and we have not seen that issue reappear. I think the key things that this patch fixed that I could call out are server crashing, server logon hangs, group policy issues with processing them. Those are just a few of them that this fixes. And actually, if you pull it up, there's like 90 fixes in this patch.
So this supersedes.
Yeah.
The Citrix recommended hot fixes a few slides back, so this would supersede what's in
It is actually on that list, so I'm assuming that they pulled off anything that is covered in this. Mm-hmm.
That's fairly new, huh?
It is. This was released, I want to say, in April. It was in spring, so not that long ago. Printing, our favorite subject. Does anybody have a flawless XenApp printing environment? Really?
Yeah, I don't map printers.
Oh.
It works.
That'll work.
But I'm not using Citrix to do it.
Okay, so you use a third party. Okay. I saw some other hands go up. Did anyone want to share? Okay. This next slide is just a picture. I feel it depicts the user perspective of why they can't print, right? Your printer just hates you. Yeah. That's how the user feels. So we, in terms of printing, have natively found a way to get printing to actually work quite well. So we're not using third party, and there are a series of tips. Some of these are easier said than done that I'm going to go through in the upcoming slides. But I can't remember the last time we had a call on printing related to XenApp itself. So I'll go ahead and start working through those. So this first tip, this is one of those easier said than done. Keep the number of your print drivers on your XenApp server to a minimum. So we took advantage of being able to move to a new farm with our XenApp 6 environment, and we started with no drivers. So we were able to slowly build that driver list up to what we really needed, and today we don't keep more than, I think it's 12 drivers on any Citrix server.
How many?
About 12.
How many Citrix servers do you have? You said you had like 80 servers. Are those all Citrix?
So we have 80 servers, and I'm going to say 10 to 15 of those are infrastructure related. Yes.
Those 12 drivers, how many different printer models and makes are you supporting?
So mostly HP. That's a standard in our organization to use HP model printers. Any drivers we install on these servers are Windows native. We have 2 exceptions to that where we actually installed HP drivers, and that is the HP Universal Print Driver. We do have one application that seemed to require that driver, but we use that, I'm gonna say we use that driver probably 1% of the time.
Did you have any problems with that driver? Because I've experienced some, and I've read that printer.
I would say that if you use that driver for most of your printing, you will have issues. Like I said, we use it probably 1% of the time. We've gone out of our way to avoid using it. It was a special case only. And so because it's not used very much, it's not up to start causing issues on the server. It's not being used.
What is good with HP Universal Driver that it's universal for different printers, and you can update it's just all printers at once. Because if you're using different drivers, different versions of the driver for different printers, you just download it from HP and using different versions. Some DLLs are shared between different drivers, and if you install newest version, oldest driver, it will not work. With Universal, it's much easier to manage. It's just one.
Okay. So we try not to use it. The other word of advice, so if you go after this initiative to try and reduce the number of drivers that you have on your servers, do not delete the HP Color LaserJet 2800 series PostScript printer driver. Does anybody know why? Has anybody done this? It's, say that again? No, your Macintoshes use it. And even if you don't have Macintosh in your environment, you're likely supporting home users that have Macs. So make sure you don't delete that. But that was a really good guess. So this next slide houses a lot of printer configuration suggestions that fall within the realm of your actual Citrix policies. So when we talk about drivers and why we can get away with running so few, it's because we rely heavily on Citrix Universal Printing. 99% of our connections, if you look at any of our servers, are all Citrix Universal Printing. And it works really well for us. Again, we do use HP printers primarily. And then I just put the setting that we use, that use printer model only if the universal printing is unavailable. That's the actual setting that we have set. The other thing I want to call out is this universal driver priority order. You'll find it in XenApp 6. You won't find it in XenApp 6.5. And I'm kind of glad they removed it, because if you start messing with the order, then your printing isn't going to function appropriately. We had an issue where we did our Windows updates, and because we use Windows native print drivers, the driver subsystem got updated, and it actually added some extra printer drivers to our server as a result of that. And somewhere along the way, this order got changed on us. I'm not sure who did it, but that's irrelevant. And we had just some servers using this totally random driver that we weren't expecting. And the funniest part is the complaint from the users was fuzzy printing. I'm like, what's fuzzy printing? You know, you think of like teddy bears and stuff when you hear fuzzy, but my advice would be don't change this order if you've never touched it, just leave it alone.
That's the default order?
I believe at that point, yeah, that's what I pulled off our system. That should be the default order. Another change that we made, and this is probably maybe a culture shock to users if they're not expecting. I wouldn't just do this without communicating, but we present only the default printer to the users. For our users, it was confusing to see a long list of printers, even if they were all of their printers. You know, Citrix does map them out a little uniquely. That was one factor. The other factor is that when you're launching an application, if you have 10 local printers, all 10 of those printers have to map, and that's going to slow down the opening of your application if you're not just doing the default. The next item is printer mappings. Again, I know our XenApp 4.5 environment, we have so many mappings, you can't make heads or tails of what's what anymore. So we took advantage in our Xen 6 deployment and minimized the number of mappings. Again, tied back to using the Citrix Universal Print Driver, minimizing drivers. It's very likely that if we have a printer mapping, it's because we had to add a custom driver for it for a certain application. So printer mapping wise, I don't think we have more than 25 mappings in our new farm.
So are you just using auto-created drivers then?
Yeah, it's when the printer maps, it's all Citrix Universal Printing, and that just automatically creates itself.
Are you using GPOs to manage that?
We do this all through Citrix, the Citrix console, Citrix policy. Yeah.
For all your client devices or Windows-based, you don't have any thin clients or anything like that?
So we do have thin clients. Actually, that's going to be one of our exceptions on the drivers for the. We have a driver installed on our servers for that. I believe it's actually why we have the HP UPD. But the way that we use thin terminals in our environment, they're not heavily used for printing. Our thin terminals are used for bedside and outside the nursing stations, so they don't do a lot of printing from those areas. So it's not used very heavily. Was there another question somewhere? Yeah.
One more question. The driver priority order, you mentioned that was removed from 6.5.
Yeah.
Really?
I looked for it and I can't find
We're
it.
using 6.5, and there's a policy that drives that. There's a Citrix policy that you set to control that.
I think you turn it on, but I didn't see where you could change the order.
Yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay, then I apologize. I misspoke. Thank you for that, for correcting that. Okay. Yeah, we just started playing with 6.5, and I didn't see it, so I was happy to see it gone. But if it's there, it's there. Okay, so printer mappings. Okay, so the last thing on the bottom, if we're trying to control our printer drivers and how many we have on our servers, we need to make sure we're not automatically installing those drivers. So you can set that to disabled. One other way that drivers can get on your servers is actually through your Citrix Administrators. If you have your RDP session set to map out your printers, you are going to end up installing drivers on those servers. So if this is something you're going to do, make sure that that's unchecked while you're managing your systems. A couple other things I want to point out. The top line, the Citrix Print Service and Print Spooler, just because of issues we'd had in our 4.5 environment and with printing in general, we make sure that those two services on all of our servers are set to restart as many times as Microsoft will allow. Just kind of one of our standard base build things. Then if something creeps up that we weren't expecting that starts messing with those services, they at least automatically restart. You go into the control panel of the server and go into the services applet, and then you'll see each of those services listed there. And if you go to the properties of each service, you'll be able to set it to restart if it fails. And it can do that up to 3 times. And then there's also a setting for when that resets itself, and the lowest you can do is, I believe, a day. Or through group policy. There you go. This application setting, I like to point out because if you're not looking for it, it's easy to miss. On each of your published applications, if you go to the properties and you go to the client options, there is a printing control in there that will allow an application to start without mapping its printers. So I like this for troubleshooting. If you were to have some form of a printing issue, I used it a lot in the 4.5 environment. You know, users hanging when their application's launching. You can tell it not to map the printers and see if their issue goes away. It's just kind of one of those troubleshooting steps that you can take.
Can I throw one thing on that?
Yes. Oh, we don't do session printing. Is that tied to session printing?
Session sharing.
Okay.
You're reusing the same session. We're launching your session.
Oh, then when you go in, you won't have a mapped printer. Is that what you're saying?
You will, so you'll have a second session.
In the console?
Yeah.
Okay.
So just on a different.
Thank you. The other thing that, again, I think easier said than done, we were fortunate enough to be able to do this top item with our electronic health record initiative. We've been able to at least commit to not one model of printer, but we've got it down to, at least for this year, a handful of models. And I think, you know, we'll continue down that path as we move forward. And by limiting the number of models of printers you have, that means less testing, less questions for the end user, at least if they're internally and on-site in your organization. And then regardless of the path you take, if you're dealing with 10 new models a week or 10 new models a year, you want to make sure you test and test and test all of your applications so there are no surprises when the users start printing to that printer. Environment sizing and architecture. I wanted to put this up here. So there is no exact science, I think, to how you architect your environment, but you definitely want, in the end, it to line up. You want it to work. So here, obviously, there was some form of disconnect along the way. So my next few slides are just more or less covering what these systems do, these roles do for our environment. Not making a ton of suggestion, just kind of this is what they do. So first of all, your farm is going to have zone data collectors, and those obviously they go out and collect data from your XenApp servers, and they'll distribute all those changes to your farm. So those are going to be things like adding applications to your environment. That's going to be like adding a user to an application. Your zone data collectors help get that information out to all the servers. And then if this role, if you only had one server dealing with that aspect, if it were down, you would have some issues with users accessing things. So you want to make sure that this is a redundant role in your environment, at least 2 servers. Yeah, we'll actually get into, I have our high-level design in one of the upcoming slides, but to answer your question, yes, we have dedicated. Web interface is another aspect of a XenApp farm. It is used to present your user their customized list of applications. You're going to use your web interface to create any kind of PN agent sites for your Citrix receiver or mobile devices. Ideally, you're going to want, at a minimum, to use SSL on this because it's likely, especially with the mobile devices, they're going to be accessing this remotely. You may want to consider second factor authentication and potentially VPN as other additional mechanisms to secure this environment. And again, this should also be a redundant role. If you only had one and it went down, everything would be down, and at least from the aspect of the end user. And then the next role are your XML brokers. These will determine which applications the web interface will provide. In our environment, our thin terminals actually go directly to our XML brokers, which is a nice offloading of some of our authentication traffic, because otherwise they'd go to the web interface. And then this should also be a redundant role. You wouldn't want to have only one server managing this. And then application servers, we always publish applications in an N+1 fashion. So even if an app only has 20 users, we're still going to deploy 2 servers for that, so we can do maintenance. So if there's problems with that system, we're not taking out our user community related to that application. Now there can be exceptions to that as well. We decided that for our electronic health record that it was a little bit more important to be able to do maintenance within a 1-week time window. And since we have so many servers that host that, we actually have N+5. So we can take out 5 servers at any one given time and not affect our end users. So here's that high-level design that I mentioned. To kind of set the playing level here, these are all virtual except the bottom one. Our virtual environment is set so that we can do backups and restores of entire servers in as little as 10 minutes. The most it would take us to restore a virtual server is an hour. It just depends on how much data is on that system. So first of all, our Citrix license server is only one. I'm not aware of a way to add redundancy to that role. But if your Citrix license server is down, your users won't be down for 30 days. They'll just get a pop-up saying the license server's down. Did I see a hand go up over there? No? Okay. We have 2 RDS license servers. This is a role that you wouldn't want to fail if you only had one. This is your terminal services licensing. We do not have these dedicated. They are on other systems. We have one of them on our Citrix license server, and we have the other one on a domain controller. And then we do have dedicated XML brokers and dedicated zone data collectors. We do have a single farm database server. We've learned that typically would only affect an administrator. When we reboot it, it doesn't affect the users. So we did not add any kind of redundancy to that. And then the very last one, our Citrix NetScaler. Actually, 2 Citrix NetScalers. They're 7500s. They're active passive. And we were an early adopter. We have web interface on NetScaler. Industry norm would not be to do that anymore. It was barely the norm when we did it. But challenges with your web interface being on your NetScaler are support and finding people to be able to work with it. It's very, very challenging. So web interface should probably be 2 separate servers and dedicated on Windows. So the settings on this slide directly correlate with sizing. So I think at the beginning of the presentation I mentioned that we were kind of all over the place with what our real concurrent user count was going to be. You know, one day it was 1900, right before go live it was 8. So we had adjusted some of these settings to accommodate that lesser number. And when we went live, we were undersized because the reality was we actually were housing 23 to 2,500 users at that point. And part of why that number was so high is because of what some of these settings were at. So, for example, our disconnected session timeout, we had set at an hour. So your disconnected session would sit on the server using resources and taking up precious real estate for other users. We now have that set to 5 minutes. Yes.
Never mind, okay. Yeah, I got that fairly high myself.
Do you?
4 hours, but all the iPad users and the people working on cell phone connections, maybe you don't have this in your environment, but disconnection is a fairly common occurrence.
So that disconnected session timeout, what that's controlling is only if the user has deliberately closed out of their session and disconnected, or tied to the active idle settings. We had those at 8 hours. We now have them at 2.
So you're saying if I disconnect because I lost my network connection, that timer's not going to kick in on my session?
Oh, yeah, that would.
So
Yeah,
if I
that
was
would.
working, say, via some kind of Wi-Fi connection, I travel out of the zone on my train for
Right.
5 minutes. My work's gone.
So what is your setting at?
4 hours.
Oh, you said 4 hours.
It comes down to your session reliability or not also.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Right now, I go through Metro Park, I lose my signal, I'm working on the train.
So you
know
want to
In
reconnect.
5 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
when I get a signal back, I'm going to want my session back so I can save my work.
So is 4 hours?
4 hours is high.
That's pretty high. So I guess you
Well,
have to
it's
step back and
default is
think about
24
what's
hours, isn't it?
realistic to the user. Honestly, I don't even remember anymore. I don't know if anybody else knows, but
I have 2 recommendations. What I'm usually doing, if users are able to work remotely from home, disconnected session timeout should be longer than average time to get home. Because some people would like to finish something at work, stop doing something at work and drive home and continue working from home.
right, that's a good point. Now it is not, in our environment, we do not have to do that. We don't use the workspace control aspect of it, which is tied to what you're talking about. It is not a requirement for our users. So in that case, these settings would definitely have to be different, and I think that correlates with what you're saying. Our users do not expect to reclaim that same session. Right, so So what we do wouldn't apply to those.
I agree with you. You see, I'm on the fence here. I agree with you as well. It's
Yeah.
the users that say, my session can't be thrown away every time I'm disconnected.
Right.
Personally, as soon as I disconnect the sessions, I want to kill them off.
Yeah, so 4 hours seems a little high based upon what you're saying, but it's really, you're going to have to listen to what your users want and need. And
You got the VP working at home, and he gets
Right.
caught up in the Tonight Show.
well, and the worst case scenario here is that your servers just have to be sized a little bit,
Yeah,
you know.
gotta look to carry that load.
Yeah, you just have to be able
But
to
there
carry
are
that
days-
load.
There's one day I found 70% of the server load was disconnected sessions.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds like what we
That
looked
was
like at Go
a
Live.
lot of resources, no users could log in.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you reboot servers each night?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Do you reboot servers each night?
We do not. We do our entire farm once a week.
Okay, so a way of solving the disconnected session issue, if you've got to hold on to it, is either reboot each night, which clears the disconnected sessions, or run, whether it be a script or there's
Well,
an
I'm
application.
already rebooting every night, so
you?
disconnected sessions aren't really a problem. It's more the user experience and being able to reclaim whatever they're in the middle of.
Another one would
I-
say about disconnection session timeout and user experience. Disconnected session is reconnected much faster than new logo. So it reduces user wait time if you keep disconnected session. Reduce user wait
Right.
time during logon, and it reduces the number of IOPS in the storage.
Right. Right. So I guess what we need to do is look at each of our environments, what the requirements are, and again, just going back to the infrastructure conversation is making sure we can accommodate that extra load if our users demand that they be able to reconnect when they get home with that same session.
Running on an iPad, and they close the
Yeah.
magnetic cover, and that's going to disconnect their
Right.
session. 5
Right.
minutes later, it's going to be gone.
Exactly.
Even though they're just walking from the conference room.
Right. So,
I'm sorry.
no, that's great. So for our environment, we are lucky enough we don't worry about that yet. I think it's coming because we're looking at Zen Desktop pretty heavily, and I can see Zen Desktop changing a lot of this. But for now, we've been able to reduce these settings. We've turned off workspace control. Active idle is set to 2 hours, and
That's hot.
that was a physician. We'll call it a compromise. The 8 hours we went live with came from the physicians.
You have an unlocked terminal for 2 hours? Seems
Well, there are other application aspects that help control that. So, for example, with our electronic health record, that session can be up but locked, and the terminal can be open. Okay. And then, so just a couple other points. These will also affect your licensing totals. And the other thing that I wish we had gone live with was just a few extra servers to make sure that we could have accommodated users while we worked through these setting changes.
What was your setting on workspace control?
It was 4 hours, and we totally disabled it. Yeah.
Maybe you're going to talk about this, but your applications, how are they organized on the servers? Do you have them set into silos, or all the applications installed on all the servers?
So that's a great question. Did everybody hear the question? Okay. So what we have a mix. We have a block of servers that we dedicate to what we call streaming apps. So if you've done any application packaging within XenApp, we run anything that we could bundle into a package off of those servers, and I believe we have something like 14 of those. And then it's like anything kind of runs on there as long as it was packaged. And then we do have installed apps. So those are the ones that we couldn't package to run on the servers that are supposed to handle as much as possible. So then in that case, we do have silos. And then especially like our electronic health record, that's all dedicated to electronic health record. So we have both. Load evaluators. So we had been a very small environment, and we previously had gotten used to doing things a certain way. But before I step into that, I just want to share one more picture, right? So our load evaluators provide the balance to our Citrix life. I just thought that was kind of fun. And so what we had done is we were basically just using the default evaluator. Yeah, I know. Well, and you know what happens when you use the default evaluator under load? It's awful. We had servers literally disappearing from QFarm load because they couldn't handle it. So I call that the server checkout phenomenon. We quickly moved away from that, but you got to remember we came from a small environment where you were lucky if you had 20 users on a server at any given time. So one of those you live and learn. So this is what I would recommend, is that you do use some form of your advanced load evaluator, create a custom one, or use the out-of-box. You want to, base it on your page file, your CPU, and anything else that may be relevant to you in terms of system performance. And then the other aspect that you should have is load throttling. Load throttling will control how much load is placed on the server when your users are logging in so that they don't consume all of the available load. So we have that set to medium. So the last topic I have is Citrix monitoring, and I have another little picture because I think making decisions about monitoring can be a challenge. So getting to that point, the first one I want to bring up is EdgeSite. I've personally gone back and forth on EdgeSite, but I think in the end it is probably going to be the best tool for monitoring your end-to-end network connectivity from the Citrix user aspect. The issue with EdgeSite is there aren't any classes for it. There's a lot of Citrix TV sessions, so you can dedicate some time to learning it on your own. And there are a lot of articles out there, so it's going to be a self-taught product. Some considerations. One is make sure you have all your antivirus exclusions in place with EdgeSite. If you do not, the FB server service will max out the CPU on your servers and make them non-functional. So these are the two articles you want to look at. Now, from our perspective, we're still kind of getting off the feet running with EdgeSite. We had previously installed it. We were running version 5.3. And there was a bug with 5.3 that supposedly was fixed with a patch that we installed, but it still seemed to have trouble. It was actually maxing CPU, and it wasn't related to the antivirus exclusions. So we actually totally removed 5.3 from our environment. And then in the last couple months, we've now deployed 5.4. So we're getting to that point where we're going to start doing that learning.
Hosts or on the monitoring?
On the actual Citrix servers, the hosts, yeah. So those articles are really, really important. And then outside of EdgeSite, these are a few of the other complementary options that we use for monitoring our servers. These are all going to be system-based, and they all provide a different aspect to our environment that we like. One, SolarWinds. We like that for the graphical depiction. You can run some reports, some pretty nice reports, and get a really good overview of what your server is doing in relation to CPU, memory, etc. We use Microsoft's SCOM product for any alerting on resource contention, as well as any service alerts. And then I think we've even built in some custom alerts for things that have creeped up along the way. And then our networking team uses HP Insight, just tracking the ups and downs of our servers, because it kind of, if we forget to put system exclusions in when we reboot things, it goofs up their monitoring. So we have that as well. Does anybody else use any products for monitoring, either Citrix or system related, that you'd want to share with the group?
Third party. Yeah, we use Nagios.
Nagios?
Extensively. PhD Virtual.
PhD Virtual, okay. And do you guys like them? You're pretty happy with it?
We have the monitoring package and the backup software.
Okay, cool. So with that is the end of my presentation. Hopefully some of these tips you'll be able to take back to your environments and get some smooth sailing, no more tidal waves. And then if there are any other questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those as well.
Your advanced load evaluators, you mentioned page file and
CPU.
CPU, which are good. Is that basically what you're using, those two criteria? Or do you have some other fancy dance sheet?
I think there's one more, and I want to just say it's memory.
Memory?
Yeah.
That's what I would throw in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you guys doing for your profiles?
So we have the Citrix Streaming Profiler installed for that. We have all of our profiles on a NAS share. On a NAS share. Profiles, even with Streaming Profiler, are still, I don't know if there's a good solution to profiles.
Do folder redirection?
We do folder redirection. Yeah, we do have to for some of our applications, yep.
Is that also on the NAS share?
The folder redirection directs them to, no, we have a server for those.
SAN?
It is on the SAN, server with SAN attached storage. Yes?
Regarding EdgeSite, on the client servers or servers, I occasionally get errors saying the database is corrupt. It then has to do Theresa valid and restart. Is that normal?
I've never seen it. Do you?
About it. It says just, delete the file and recreate it.
And does that help, or?
It'll go a week or two and it'll happen again.
And then it'll happen again.
It's not every day, it's just annoying. It sends out the alert saying, hey, the database is unreachable.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it. I'd have to spend some time researching it. If that would be helpful, I could do that for you. Okay. Any other questions? No? All right, I'm going to put my contact information up here as well. If you have any other questions that come up, feel free to email me at either one of those addresses. And then I think it's just about pinball time, right? It's coming soon, right? Thank you, everyone.